This painting nearly destroyed me, and I'm not even exaggerating either. This thing fought me the entire way through. Originally I wanted to make another seascape, similar to the one I'd done before on this channel, using water mixable oils and lots of texture. But for some reason I thought, yeah, let's do that again, but way bigger and with completely different materials, which in hindsight maybe wasn't the smartest idea. So this canvas is huge. I don't actually think the scale fully comes across on camera, but moving this thing around was awful. Every time I needed to rotate it, or sand it, or repaint something, I genuinely regretted making it this size. But anyway, at the start I was feeling fine about everything. I taped off the horizon line, started messing around with metallic paints and inks, and I had this really nice image in my head of what I wanted the final piece to look like. And for about maybe 30 minutes, I thought it was going well. And then I hit the stage where I just hated everything. And the more I worked on it, the more I hated it, which is honestly a pretty common theme for me with painting. I feel like there's always this horrible middle stage where everything looks terrible and you just have to trust the process and push through it. But with this one, the terrible stage lasted the entire process. So it's probably no surprise to you that what you're seeing here is nothing like what the final piece looked like. But I thought instead of cutting out all of the fails, I'd keep them in as much as possible. Hopefully this will show you that not all artworks are a simple, straightforward process. Every artist gets it wrong once in a while. I think at this point I was still trying to save the original idea instead of accepting that it just wasn't working. And also, acrylics behave so differently compared to the water mixable oils that I used before. The oils felt way smoother and easier to blend. With acrylics, I felt like I was fighting against the drying time constantly. Especially on a canvas this big. Like by the time I had worked on one side, the other side had already started drying. Which was mildly infuriating. Honestly, I think this painting became less of an art piece and more of a very expensive experiment. But anyway, here I decided to try gold leaf for the first time ever. And this genuinely felt like one of those moments where either A, the painting suddenly comes together and things start working, or B, I completely ruin it. And unfortunately I think we landed slightly closer to option B. had this idea where the gold would peek through underneath the paint and create all this depth and texture in the sky. But once I actually started layering over it, it just looked messy. And this is where the painting completely changed direction. Recently I'd been testing fluid art and bloom techniques on smaller canvases, and I still wasn't fully happy with the results. So naturally, I decided the best idea would be to try it on the biggest canvas I own. Makes sense. So for this part, I had to bring out Lazy Dave. Now most people I know call these Lazy Susans. But honestly, I feel like Susan's been unfairly targeted for years. Plus, you could say it's a bit sexist. So mine's called Lazy Dave. And because this canvas was so big, normal Lazy Dave wasn't good enough. So I basically had to turn him into a helicopter. If you haven't seen my last couple videos, they show the process a little bit more clearly. But essentially I create a base of house paint, then layer paints on top and blow out the design with a hairdryer. Then I spin the design out. However, this house paint apparently had a ton of bubbles in it. And once I'd noticed them, that was it. The whole painting was ruined in my head immediately. But for the time being, I just ignored them. don't know if you can really see it here, but there were little white specks all across the entire painting because the base paint had trapped loads of bubbles in it. And considering how much paint had already gone into this canvas at this point, finding out I needed to sand it back again was painful. I think this was the closest I came to giving up on the whole thing, honestly. Because every stage of this painting felt like starting over. I'd fix one issue and then immediately create another one. But after being annoyed about it for a while, I decided I may as well try one last time. So this was attempt number 2 with the bloom technique. And by this point, I was trying to be way more careful with everything and just hoping for less bubbles this time. This version, I kind of accepted that it probably wasn't going to be perfect anyway. And honestly, I think that helped. Because sometimes the more you try to control fluid art, the worse it gets. You sort of have to just let it do its thing a bit. Which is difficult if you're someone who likes controlling every detail, and I definitely struggle with that. I think that's partly why this painting became so frustrating for me. Most of the artwork I do normally is very controlled, whereas this process felt a lot more unpredictable. But this attempt definitely came out better. Not perfect, there was still some imperfections and a few annoying little spots here and there. But I'd reached the point where I just knew I wasn't ever going to be completely happy with it. And honestly, I was tired. I also just wanted to take the time to say that I've now started streaming on Twitch. I did a stream on YouTube which went fine, but it's looking like it's going to be easier to become monetized on Twitch. Ideally I'd be able to stream on both platforms at once, but that costs money. So I'll make a promise that when I become monetized on YouTube, I will start dual streaming, but for now I'll be streaming over on Twitch. I'll hopefully remember to put the link in the description, or you can just search for me on Twitch. This painting took so much longer than I expected. Not even just the painting itself either. Waiting for layers to dry, repainting sections, sanding everything. It just became this endless cycle. I also massively underestimated how difficult large canvases are compared to smaller ones. Everything takes longer, everything uses more paint, everything is harder to move, and even filming was more awkward. There was definitely a lot happening behind the scenes that didn't make it into the video. Mostly me sitting there silently questioning my life choices. But once this layer had dried properly, I finally got to the stage where I could start refining things instead of completely restarting them. Which honestly felt like a miracle at this point. So here I am, just going around, outlining some of the cells and cleaning up areas that were distracting me. There were still some obvious bubble spots and little imperfections, so I painted over some of those areas just to make them blend in a little bit better. Then, finally, I coated the artwork in a layer of resin, which I did not film, mainly because there was absolutely no way I was risking ruining this piece at the final step, while also trying to think about the recording. Especially with a resin pour this big, I was stressed enough already. I feel like resin always gives me this false confidence right before I start pouring, like, yeah, this'll be fine. And then 5 minutes later, I'm panicking because bubbles start appearing. But luckily, it actually went smoothly. Sort of. There were a few spots where the resin pulled away from the edges, which I could have probably fixed with another layer of resin, but I just wasn't going to use a load more resin for that. And after all the repainting, all the sanding, all the failed attempts, the bubbles, the gold leaf experiments, and the helicopter operations with Lazy Dave, this ended up being the final result.